All right, everyone, welcome back to From the Stands. Alex Goldman and Josh Beatar here, joined by a man that's not only straight out of Compton, but straight out of Team Compton himself, Elliot Compton. So, Elliot, thank you so much for joining us today, man. We really
Thanks for
appreciate
having
it.
us. Thank you for
Hey,
having us.
how you doing today, man?
Yeah, really good, man. Super busy day, but it's done now. It's 4:15 here in Brisbane on a Friday afternoon. So
Yeah,
training
exactly.
is done for the day, and I'm just kicking back, chatting to you guys.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. So, look, Elliot, I want to get straight into it, man. And you're obviously someone that's been on the Australian scene now for quite a while. And I was wondering if you could walk us back to the beginning. Your introduction to martial arts and the beginning of your journey as a martial artist.
Yeah, for sure, man. I started training at about 4 years old under my old man. He originally took me to like the kids class of where he was training. We just moved over from the UK, and took me into the kids class, but I was just like that little bit too young to train with the older kids, And martial arts wasn't that big for young kids at that stage in life. So I just trained at home with him in the garden for a little while. And then when I turned 5 is when I actually started like taking the classes properly and showing up every single week. And that's kind of just where my journey started. And from there, we've gone on to travel the world and fight the biggest names on the biggest stages. And, I've always kind of trained in so many different forms of martial arts, from Muay Thai to kickboxing to Junfan Jeet Kune Do to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to shoot box and shoot wrestling. Been fortunate enough to train with so many people around the world, so many big names, and fortunate enough to do it with my dad and my family by my side, So it's been a hell of a journey so far, to be honest. Like it's been wild to think what we've done and where we've been and what we've seen, but I still feel like I'm only just getting started too, which is the beauty of this sport, right?
Yeah.
Body feels good, and I feel like I'm still getting better every single day, 30 years later. So that's got to be the motivation, right?
Definitely. Elliot, something I want to get your take and your thoughts on, man, is the state at the moment of Australian MMA and sort of your thoughts. And, obviously, the Eternal card was announced last week for Sydney, and that's a huge event. And then you've got Hex 27 a few weeks prior. You've got UFC 293, and then right after that we've got Beatdown Promotions 5, and it's with headlined by Janae Harding, which is a massive event. And what I like to compare this to at the moment, I don't know if you're an old school wrestling fan, but back in the day with WWF and the WCW and the Monday Night Wars, and it's kind of like, at the moment, Hexen are sort of starting to rise a bit and starting to compete with Eternal, which I think is wonderful. I do think competition is going to create, force Eternal and force these other promotions to up their game, and which only creates a better product for the fighters and for us as media and for the fans. So for you and sort of where you've come from and how you've seen the sport progress over the years, what are your thoughts on the state of Australian MMA at the moment?
Yeah, for sure, man. So, like, it's important to note too. Like, I've been fighting Thai boxing for the majority of my career, absolutely, but I'm no stranger to the MMA scene here in Australia. And I've seen it from the absolute grassroots level to like the very first ever caged event here in Australia. My old man was involved in that with multiple fighters, and like I've seen it come all the way up. I think Australian MMA right now is probably the best that it's ever been, in my opinion. We've got some absolute killers coming through. And I think that is represented by the fact that we've got these shows like Hex, Eternal, and Beatdown all coming along and, taking the time to actually promote the talent that we have here in Australia. And I still believe that, when you look back to the Thai boxing days and even like early boxing days, we've always had some of the best fighters in the world coming out of this country, like Australian Muay Thai fighters are renowned as some of the best in the world and were for a long time, thanks to big promotions such as like Evolution Promotions and things like that, So I think now that we're starting to see these other promotions like Eternal, Hex, Beatdown, really start to put Australian fighters back on the map again and give the athletes a platform to showcase not just their abilities in terms of how well they can fight and what they can do in the cage, but showcase their personalities and get the fans to connect with who they are as people and get to know their backstory in their life. And, then we got like guys like you guys in media outlets, like we got way more Australian media outlets than we've ever had, which again is like perfect for guys like me and other people to tell their story and, connect with the fans and let the fans know that, hey man, like we are the same as you guys, like we get in the cage and fight, but we hustle every single day the same as you guys do. And without the fans, without the media, without the promoters, we couldn't do what we do, and it's important to respect and remember that.
Yep.
For sure. So, Elliot, something that we've noticed at the last few events where, your fighters have competed on is that your gym seems to have really had a focus on elbows and the use of elbows, in MMA, over the last couple of events. And I just wanted to know, was that something your gym started implementing because you saw, essentially it as an underutilized weapon in MMA, kind of similar to how the jab isn't used enough? Or is it just something that's always been part of your training at, Compton Training Center, and it's now just starting to pay off for all your fighters?
Yeah, man, it's definitely been like a huge part of our training, right? From day one, like my first ever fight was a full Thai rules fight in Thailand against a guy with 200 plus fights, So for us, like the elbows have always been a huge part of our game, and I've always drawn like a lot of inspiration from guys like Nathan Carnage Corbett, who, in my opinion, is probably one of the best elbow fighters that the world has ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
So like we really have spent so much time with our pro athletes, but also with our amateurs, not necessarily intentionally saying, hey, look, you need to learn the elbow, but just, hey, this is our striking system. This is what we've done. This is what has made me successful in my Muay Thai career. And obviously, like, it pays off, Then there's so many different angles that you can find with the elbows under an MMA rule set that doesn't necessarily apply to a Muay Thai rule set, whether it's standing, grappling, or whatever, in that kind of medium range, close range. So it's just something that's kind of happened organically just through like the way that me and my old man and my dad have always trained, and I think the best defense against an elbow is an offensive elbow, to be honest. It's like if we're going to elbow each other, I want to make sure I get there first,
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, like, obviously it's something that we do train, I would say that we necessarily go out of our way to game plan elbows against other athletes or other gyms or anything like that. It's just something that is just so ingrained in what we do that it just comes out when we train,
Yeah, definitely. Elliot, something, before we sort of touch on your own career, something I want to get your thoughts on is obviously the big train, Tom Nolan, who makes his Dana White's Contender Series debut in a couple of weeks' time. Obviously, it's a very exciting time right now for Team Compton and for him as well. More importantly, getting that opportunity to potentially become the next Australian UFC athlete. How high do you think his ceiling can be in the sport, and what sort of performance do you think he displays for his Dana White's Contender Series fight? Do you think he drags it out and shows his full arsenal? Do you think he just goes out there and puts it away early?
I think Tom, particularly in this next fight, can do whatever he wants to do. I mean, don't get me wrong, his opponent, Bogdan Grad, is definitely like a stellar opponent. I think he's like 11-1 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But Tom is just on another level, He is one of the hardest workers that I've ever come across in the gym, He sacrificed a lot to get to where he is, moved away from his hometown, moved to Brisbane to join us, went through a lot of adversity in his private life in that time, and still stuck the course, He's never misses a session. He's always on the mats. His ceiling, he is definitely UFC champion worthy. I look at the work that he's doing with my dad, Steve Compton, at the moment, and it's like every single session he is just like finding a new ceiling every single time, And you're dead right. It's an exciting time for us as a gym, for Tom personally and his family and everything else. But I think it's also an exciting time for Australian MMA fans in general, that it's another superstar in the making that's going to put Australia on the map once again and open doors to the generation below him.
Yeah.
Same as the guys like Volkanovski and guys like that have done for his generation. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
So I think it's as far as Tom goes, like we've got a lot of talent in our gym, and he is definitely like got everything that he needs to be successful at any level in this sport. It's up to him on how far he takes it. If he decides to go all the way, he will absolutely go all the way. If he decides, hey man, I'm just going to kind of play around, then that's cool. That's up to him, but he definitely has the heart and mind of a champion. And I think that on August 9th Australian time, you're going to see that on the Contender Series for sure, man.
And, that kind of leads into my next question, Elliot, which is, you kind of touched on it, which is, your gym does have all this up and coming talent, to name one, Chloe Henry, who I thought looked, much improved, in her last fight, and she just seems to be improving in leaps and bounds. But I was wondering, are there any other sort of upcoming fighters from your gym that, you'd like to mention that you feel have a, either particular talent for this sport or they're particular hard workers that you think can really go all the way?
Yeah, absolutely, man. I think, obviously everyone always says this about their entire team, but I definitely wholeheartedly believe that every single person that steps foot on our mats as part of our competition team, whether they're amateur, professional, jiu-jitsu athletes, whatever they are, they absolutely have all the makings of a champion because we won't accept anything less. When you're surrounded by the level of talent that you are, you have to rise to the occasion every single time you come to the gym. And if you don't, man, you're going to get swallowed whole. You got guys on the team like Don Marfan, a kid is absolute killer.
Yeah.
I've literally seen him make heavyweight black belts look like white belts. You have no idea how this kid is. You've seen him fight and you've seen him showcase some skills for sure. That's not even a fraction of what he has in the tank. I'm telling you now. We just got to get to that point where he can open the door on fight night and let that talent out. Through some worthy opponents, which I think that he's definitely got coming up. Then we've got guys like Jaden Binney, who I believe has some of the best jiu-jitsu in the country, hands down, across any weight division, guys like Jackson Weir, guys, absolute stud, and the chin of steel, absolute workhorse. Blair, Blair Bratag, easy to look at his last fight and say, oh, okay, yeah, he dropped one. But, that was his second ever fight against Khan Sandy, who I think was
he's been around.
3-3 or something like that, now 4-3, and he's fought the best talent that there is, and all credit to Khan, he got the win done, but he had to work for it. Blair really had him kind of in a bit of trouble a few times, so he's another one with a lot of talent. Guys like Stewie Nickel, as you said, Chloe, we've got another guy, Mantha, who's coming through. He hasn't fought for us yet, but I guarantee you when he will, he'll blow everybody's socks off. Guys like Rog, Nick Morgan, he's 2-1 as an amateur now. And these are just kind of not casual. We don't have casual guys at the gym, but these are some of the just amateurs that just want to kind of find their way, and they're already killers. But it's hard. You think you're like a 1-on-1 amateur or a 2-on-1 amateur, and you're getting rounds with guys like me, Damian Brown, Tom Nolan, Dom. You have no choice but to kind of either get better or quit.
Yeah, exactly. Swim or sink.
Yeah, exactly. And so far, we haven't had anyone quit, touch wood. So I think we're on the right track,
Yeah, definitely. Well, look, Elliot, something I've been meaning to ask you and really want to sort of get to the bottom of is when we can see you return next. I know there were some talks about possibly Hex and those sort of things, but I'm one that's, very interested in your career and sort of when you'll be fighting next. I know one championship was earlier this year, the Friday night fights, I believe they are. But is there anything scheduled for you or anything you've got on the outlook that you'd like to, that you're allowed to say at least?
Yeah, look, we've definitely got something scheduled. I can't tell you what or where or who. You'll know very soon. The only thing I can say is it'll be on a screen near you. It's
awesome. That's fantastic.
It'll be. Hopefully, we'll have it announced within the next fortnight or so. It won't be back with one championship. It'll be with a different organisation, but it's going to be exciting. That's for sure. So I can't say more than that, but it's going to be a fun one. So
awesome.
Yeah, we'll see how it plays out.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. Well, look, Elliot, last couple of questions from us, last one from me anyway, is we were talking to Matt Myers the other day and he kind of spoke about how the culture in gyms has kind of changed. It seems like in a lot of gyms now, people aren't just thrown in the deep end from day one. You got to figure out, white belt survival mode basically for the first 6 months, right? Is that something that, that sort of statement, would you agree with that in general across the board, gyms seem to have changed, in terms of how people are brought up in the sport? Or do you think that just really depends on what gym you go to?
I definitely think it's gym dependent. But I also feel like this probably could get me in a bit of trouble, but I'm going to go there anyway. I also feel like that's somewhat a thing in the sport in general, not even just in terms of gyms, I feel like there's a lot of people out there that like to play the numbers game and not necessarily the experience of fighting game, And I think a lot of that is dictated by coaches, gyms, rankings. And I don't necessarily think that it's the best option for people to gain the experience that they need to be successful at the highest level in this sport. You know, when you look at guys like they've gone on to be super successful in the UFC, like Alex Volkanovski, Dan Hooker, Israel, all those sorts of guys, you know, they all took the hardest fights that were available to them. You know, they tested themselves on the regional circuit. You know, they may not have been undefeated, some of them, when they crossed over into the UFC. It may not have been the fastest path to the UFC, but it was definitely the most educational path to the UFC. They knew exactly, you know, they've been battle tested on the local circuit against like good guys, but not like these top level elite guys that you get in some of these international organizations. But like, this is not me shitting on anyone's way of doing things. You know, everyone has their own way of doing it. You know, I look at the way that I came up in Muay Thai, and for me, like, I was always chasing the hardest fights that I could possibly get. You know, like I said, my very first ever fight was against a guy with 200 plus fights in Thailand, you know, in real Thailand too, you know.
Yeah.
And that's always been the ethos of my whole career, you know, is like try and take the fights that, you know, like they count for 5 fights, you know, like you're fighting the big, tough, experienced guys. You know, like, it's one thing to be able to say that you're the best in the world. It's another thing to know that you're the best in the world. Those are 2 different things, you know?
Yeah.
And so for me, like, and I'm the same in my MMA career, you know, like I took on Takuya Oyama in my MMA debut, who was a guy who's 11-6, former Japanese champion, pro boxing experience. You know, he was a big opponent for me to make my MMA debut against. And that's what I asked for. Like, when I started working with Beatdown Promotions, I said to them, hey, Damo, if we're going to do this, man, I want a high-level opponent, you know? Yeah. And that's what they found. And then I fought Alison Barbosa, who had like 40-odd MMA fights, you know? And to be honest with you, I'm still not entirely sure what the referee saw that night. I'm still trying to piece that together myself. But, you know, like, that's neither here nor there, you know? I definitely didn't tap, that's for sure, and the choke wasn't on. But it is what it is, you know?
Yeah.
So I think that does come down to gym culture, you know, and that's the culture that our gym has always had. It's about challenges, you know, it's about going out there and, you know, putting yourself in an uncomfortable position through training camp, through everything, you know, and having to look yourself in the mirror the day after a fight and knowing, hey, man, I got the win or I didn't win, but I really had to test myself and I pushed myself beyond my limit, and I know what's in me. I know what I'm made of, you know.
Yeah.
You know, but then I also understand there's the business aspect of the game now, where you kind of have to play the numbers game a little bit, otherwise you miss out on opportunities. You know, when you see guys that on paper aren't very good, but in reality are probably some of the best fighters in the world, never get the opportunities that they deserve because they've taken the harder fights and their record doesn't necessarily, like, we've got a guy at our gym, Matt Seaton, who on paper is 0-4 as an MMA fighter, but the kid's an absolute killer, you know what I mean? But like, his very first ever MMA fight, he fought Paul Loga, who I think was the former XFC champion, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he took him to a split decision, you know? Yeah. And then he fought, you know, like guys like Alan Hartley, and he fought, can't remember the other kid's name from Adelaide, who was an undefeated fighter. And then he fought Rocky, and, you know, could have gone either way. But, you know, like, to say that he's 0-4 does absolutely not represent who he is as a fighter. You know, you would look at that and go, rubbish. Like, he, in my opinion, is still one of the best flyweights in the country. But on paper, it just doesn't work out like that, you know. And the problem that we had for him was no one wanted to fight him because he had this extensive Muay Thai background. He'd Australian champion, state champion, whatever else. So the lesser guys lower down the ranks didn't really want to fight him, but the guys at the top didn't want to fight him either because he was 0-2, 0-3. That were like, hey, if we lose to him, how does that look on paper? And the chances of losing to him is pretty high. And at the time, I thought, man, this is the most bizarre thing ever. You know, like, surely these kids just want to get in and have a scrap and see where they sit against one of the best strikers in the country. Fast forward to my MMA career, and here we are, almost in a similar situation. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that's the sport. That's how it is. I understand. You know, like, you got to see the business side of it. Everyone's in this to kind of make some money and, you know, get to the UFC or get to Bellator or to one championship or to these major organizations to put food on the table for their family. I get that. But I guess, you know, like, sometimes you got to ask yourself, do you do it for the clicks or do you do it for the kids? You know, and you know, I can speak on behalf of everybody at Team Compton Training Center. They have been thrown into the deep end and they've learned to survive in the gym. the same things happen on fight night. We feed them to the wolves a bit and see what they're made of. And so far, they've come back swimming. So it's pretty good.
Yeah, it's definitely evident. Elliot, last question from me, man. I sort of want to know, what are some goals that you have set in mind, whether it be in your fight career, with the training center, daily work life? What's some goals that you've sort of got set out at the moment that you really want to tick off for this year and the year coming?
Yeah, that's a good question, man. I'm at this point in my career now where I've had 62 fights. I fought all over the world. I fought the biggest names, as we've said. I'm at a point where I want to take the fights that excite me, the ones that, like put a fire in my belly, and, the ones that kind of lead me on the journey that I've already been following, definitely like the world stage is where I believe that I belong, and regardless of whatever happened in my last outing, I still believe that was a fair matchup,
Yep.
I think if we'd got back to the feet, I copped that cut from a head clash, but I still believe that, I escaped whatever that choke attempt was.
Yep.
And the ref stopped it. I feel like if that fight had gone on, it definitely, who knows, maybe I would have lost or maybe I would have won, but it definitely would have been an absolute cracker of a fight.
Yeah.
So for me, like my goals are, I just want to be active. I come from a Muay Thai background where I used to fight like 6 to 8 times a year, and that's what I want to get back to. That's when I do my best work. I've gone through a bit of a stage when I was under contract with a former organization where, sometimes I'd go 19 months without a fight, and then it'd be like another 12 months, and then it would be like up and down, and it wasn't anybody's fault. It was just kind of the way that it played out. I'm not pointing the bony finger of blame at anyone. Unfortunately, that's how it happened at the time. And I think sometimes that's a product of ranking systems too. It's people tend to not necessarily want to risk rankings and try and play the game that way too. And I was fortunate to be ranked number 5 in the world. I worked really hard for that for a long time, and that's kind of where I want to go in my MMA career now. I want to kind of chase the same journey and chase the same big fights, and really test myself. Like I'm a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I've been a brown belt now since 2019. Like I said, I've trained with MMA guys my whole career. I really want to test. I understand there's a big difference between being a good MMA fighter in the gym and being a good MMA fighter in the cage on fight night. So for me, I really want to just go out there and experience new things and challenge myself and build the gym, like you said, just continue to keep producing these champions that we've kind of done for the last 20 odd years, and continue that into the next generation. And I'd like to see my old man retire happy, and see my mum made, and have my wife and my daughter kicking back and enjoying life. And I think the biggest thing for me, where I'm at in my career now, is my blood absolutely bleeds for this. This is everything that I believe in, and it's everything that I've dedicated my life to. But I also understand that, I can take it fight to fight. There's no pressure. It's just, let's get in there and enjoy the journey. And, the destination will come. As cliche and corny as that sounds, I think that's the biggest thing I've learned across my 15-year career of 62 fights. It's like everything always works out, but like me and my old man always clashing, and, him trying to tell me it will work out. And me saying, no, it won't. He's always right. And, I think my biggest goal is to just get consistent and, and enjoy a good life, which I do already. Don't get me wrong. Like my life's phenomenal, but I think that's my biggest goal, is just to provide for everybody,
Yeah, amen. Yeah. Awesome, brother. Thank you so much for your time today, man. It's been an absolute pleasure. Well, one thing I want to say is you really are one of the pioneers of not only Thai boxing, MMA, but combat sports in general in this country, man. And what you're doing at Team Compton and the guys you're producing, the talent that's coming out of there is phenomenal. And a lot of that's due to you and your father. So thank you very much for what you've done for the sport, man. And thank you for joining us today, man.
Appreciate it. We'll catch up again soon, huh?
Definitely. Thank you, Elliot. Thank you, brother.
Thanks, guys.